each and every one of you tonight, if your time is you create time to exist.
Perfect.
In this way will be the allowance of the idea of the exercise, the going into the imagination in this way, the forming of the crystal consciousness within each and every one of you. And collectively together the idea of the forming of the matrix of the idea of the crystalline consciousness, so that each and every one of you may participate in the idea of forming together a matrix that will allow you to stick in the idea of togetherness within the idea of the transference that will allow you to go within your consciousness in this way. We will decide and discover the idea that the idea of dimensionality in and of itself will be something that you attribute to the idea of mathematics and the idea of height, width, and depth. You will now explore the idea of the dimensionality of your own existence in this way, and utilize the idea of the structure of the matrix to be able to go within 90 degrees out of phase to the idea of your consciousness. Regarding the dimension of your imagination, it's simply another differentiation, another perspective, another idea of out of phase, the idea 90 degrees out of phase to the reality you understand to be the dimension of your imagination. Are you all following along?
Yes.
No.
Will this represent a speed at which you can fathom the idea?
Yes.
In this way, allow us to eliminate the idea that there will be a dimension of imagination as has been expressed to you in this way. You can regard the idea of your physical reality as an expression of 90-degree phase differentiation, phase conjugation from the idea of your second density representing the idea that you are in your third. We will start at the beginning. Represent the idea by closing your eyes in this way and manifesting the idea of the relaxation through 3 deep breaths. As you partake of the idea of the 3D breath, recognize that you are breathing in the idea of the atmosphere, the electromagnetic connection that connects each and every being together within the civilization you call your own. Recognize in this way that as you breathe together the idea of the atmosphere, you are linking within yourself the identification of your very creativity, the very origin of your own individual identity, the very origin of your collective identity as a mass consciousness in this way. You are allowing yourself the fundamental feeling of the creation, of the vibration of the atmosphere and the thickening round and about you of that which will represent the fluid in which you exist, the fluid out of which you create the reality you know to be yourselves in this way. The idea that is the vibration of unconditional love with which you are surrounded, which immerses you in this way, which fills you in this way, which you breathe in and out every moment of time that you create to exist out of the same fluid, out of which the identity that you know to be yourselves also exists. You are one and the same idea, one and one part and parcel of the idea of the creation of the fluid, being the identification of your own consciousness out of the fluid, the identification of any idea you call reality out of the same fluid, the projection of this reality in front of your senses as you create the illusion to exist, but all is created out of the same fundamental fluid, the electromagnetic effluvium of the idea of the creation of the vibration of the fundamental primal energy that is the creation of the homogeneous energy that is the primal energy itself of creation in this way. Allow yourself the opportunity as you have breathed in and out this idea of the fluid to simply recognize that you are just as homogeneous as the fluid you are breathing in, and allow there to be in your imagination for now no separation between the idea of the outside reality, the inside reality, and the being you know yourself to be. Allow yourself the opportunity to feel that you are made out of the same substance in this way, that you're simply a solidified vibration of the idea, a little bit more coherent in terms of the vibration that represents the idea of your identity being where you are in time and space. But in this way now begin to allow yourself to recognize that you are starting from this 0 point identity, no dimension at all. Imagine yourselves to be a point within a void, and in the void there is nothingness in this way. You exist within this point in one single point, and stretching away from you in infinity direction in every 360 degrees is nothing to eternity in this way that you understand to be any kind of reality whatsoever. You are simply at the center of a void. Allow yourselves to let this sink and soak into the idea of the fabric of creation as you know your energy to be focused in this single point for now. With 3 deep breaths, again, allow yourself to identify as simply that the entire universe as you know it exists totally within this single point, and you are the single point. You are everything in the universe, but you are all within this single point. Now allow yourselves in this way to recognize that you know yourself to be a single point in this sense, contained within the idea of everything that exists within this single point. And now you have the recognition that you can realize an idea of being outside yourself now that you have recognized the void. The first direction and the first dimension in which you will realize yourself will be the idea and the expression from this single point outward. One direction in front of you, one direction in back of you, of the forming of the idea of a single line. You will now, upon this revelation, upon this realization, explode into a single line stretching to infinity before, stretching to infinity aft in this way, becoming a single line of vibratory energy in this way, straight as a laser beam in that way, as you call that terminology upon your planet. Before and aft you now exist infinitely in a single dimension, and recognize that all that you had contained within the idea that you were as a single point is now also contained within the idea of the line. Any point along the line is one of the many infinite eternal points that exist between the idea of any other 2 points upon the place of the line. In this way you can recognize that any space upon the line is infinite unto itself, contains all the infinite realities that you will understand yourself to be and understood yourself to be within the point. Now you allow yourself to recognize that you have phased out 90 degrees from the idea in 2 directions of the idea of the point that you were, and now that you are a line stretching to infinity, there is another direction 90 degrees in this way that you can allow yourself to be. You can recognize the idea of the ascension and descension of the idea, in lateral movement of the idea spreading outward in what you call to be a plane 90 degrees in phase to the idea of the line perpendicular to it in this way. And allow yourselves simultaneously in this way, as you receive this revelation within yourselves, to explode into a plane that stretches into infinity in this way, in every direction according to the flat idea of the representation of the line, the many lines, the infinite number of lines. You now find yourselves to be 90 degrees in one direction, 90 degrees in another direction of the idea of the line that you used to be, which was only a 90 degree extension of the idea of the point that you used to be in this way. And now you can recognize that within this infinite plane, you are an infinite plane in this way, stretching to infinity eternally in this way, and contains the totality of all the number of infinite lines that represent all the different universes in line and linear reality that have ever been, are now, and shall ever be in this way. And you begin to recognize that as you recognize the idea of the time frame within the present, the past, and the future in this way, you begin to recognize that as you are now a plane, you also exist in this way as a plane reality in all infinities, and contain the entire idea of many different infinities of lines in this way, in all time modes, all frames of reference, 90 degrees to what you have been. Now you begin to recognize that much more readily, that much more rapidly, the idea that this 90-degree phase conjugation in this way can continue in a spiral pattern in this way, always perpendicular to itself. And you begin to realize that you can in this way become an infinite series of planes, filling the idea of the previous void to be a volume which you can contain within yourself in this way. And you find that as you allow yourself the revelation of the experience in the 90-degree perpendicularity of the idea to the plane that you were, you now allow yourself to explode to the idea of an infinite series of planes above you, an infinite series of planes below you in this way, and begin to be the third density vibrational reality that allows you to fill the void in a spherical fashion infinitely in every direction. You are now the solidness filling the void that was previously there when you existed in the idea of a point, when you existed in the idea of a line, when you existed in the idea of a plane. There was void above you, void below you in this way. Now there is no void in the idea. You fill the idea of the internal void, and in this way you search around, for you recognize that you have filled the void 90 degrees in every direction. You can fill the void, and the idea of your understanding is now that there is no more directions to go, but in this way you recognize there is one. There is the idea in this way of recognizing that you have expanded outward, and in this way you now create the reflection and reverberation of the idea of expanding inward to be the 90-degree phase that stretches into your imagination. And as you find yourself expanding inward, you realize you are not covering territory you have covered. You are not retracing your steps in this way, but you are actually breaking in a 90-degree parallelity in this way into a new dimension. As you recognize this revelation, you will explode inward in this way, 90 degrees in phase to the idea that you previously were. In filling the physical dimensional void, you recognize now that you have taken upon yourself the idea of mimicking and reflecting the idea of a parallel, alternate crystal which exists within the crystal you have become. There is a universe that exists within the universe that you were, a void that exists within the void that you have filled, and in this way you recognize that you have now, with this breakthrough, 90 degrees within yourself. You recognize it to be the dimension that you call imagination. In this third density void, you have called this idea the imagination. Now you recognize that as you go 90 degrees inward into yourself, there is now the recognition and the revelation that there is an infinite number of 90-degree phase conjugations that allow you to forever and eternally go further and further inward into yourself in an infinite series of 90-degree directions that allows you to know you are a constant spiral of energy, always manifesting 90 degrees perpendicular to the previous dimension in which you existed, allowing yourself to recognize that there is an infinite amount of dimensions and density, vibrations and variations into which you will always find yourself instantaneously exploding. Now, allow yourself to recognize in this way that you have become an infinite series, an infinite number of facets, an infinite number of crystals, an infinite number of dimensions, an infinite number of realities. an infinite number of probabilities, and in this way you can recognize that each and every being within any reality you experience is only a projection of the number of infinite crystals that exist within any given reality. That means that you are every being in every reality, and every being in every reality is you in this way. And as you project the idea of an infinite number of facets, an infinite number of reflections, an infinite number of mirrors, you simply recognize that all that you are seeing are only you reflected in different 90-degree phase variable conjugations, being reflections back to yourself through different points of view, your energy having taken different routes through the infinite, all that is, and coming back to you through the representations of the different windows of the infinite, which is all the beings that surround you are. They are the windows of the infinite that reflect all the different ideas that you have become in all the infinite universes, coming back through the spiraling motion to the center of your being, to the phase point, the primal point you started out as being, where you always find yourself to be. You have sent yourself out spiraling through the idea of yourself, and find yourself always returning back to yourself, forming upon yourself the closed idea of the infinite, multifaceted spherical crystal that you find yourself to be. Now, eternally, within and without. Now recognize what we have done in this way has allowed you to explore a certain facet of your imagination that will allow you to form what is necessary for the trip to come in this way that Bashar will assist you within. For now you have formed within you a subconscious and unconscious and a conscious linking to each and every identity within your crystalline fabric in this way of the particular universe that you exist within. And you will allow yourself to partake and parcel of the idea of the transformation to any level of density vibration in this way. And you will always link yourself together and transport yourselves as a mass unit in this way, while still maintaining the individuality that allows you to mark yourself as one individual facet of the multidimensional crystal you have now discovered yourselves to be. Recognize first and foremost that every single journey into your imagination is just as real as any other reality you have ever experienced and ever will experience in this way. And now we will turn back the idea to the transportation of your endeavor into the spacecraft, as you call the projection of consciousness that you call a spacecraft, back to the identity you call Bashar in this way. We will thank you for the sharing and the allowing of the idea to us to turn on the illumination of the idea of the 90-degree phase conjugation that was your reality in this way, the crystallization of your imagination, which shall now and forevermore, eternally in the now present moment, always be reflecting to you all the probabilities you can become and all the probabilities you are in any given moment of time. We thank you for the sharing you have allowed us to partake this evening of your time, and we now, in this way, instill within you our projection for an enjoyable experience within your imagination in this way. We thank you and bid you a fond good night.